Dat to you? Welcome into the podcast, the Dat Confessional podcast here. I do want to apologize real quick for any sound issues we might have had, and also want to say I'm sorry for not being around for a couple weeks. My stream PC, what I used to actually make all this, died, and I had to go buy a new one. That was fun. As you can imagine, I am being facetious, so I did miss a couple weeks. Big apologies for that, but we're back now, and what a time to get back for one of the grittiest games. And look, this is going to maybe sound hyperbolic or silly or going a little outrageous, but I really do believe this. I think it's one of the grittiest games we've seen the Saints play in 2 decades. And when I mean gritty, I mean how hard they worked, how they persevered. And yeah, thank you. I do realize I have the wrong title up. Thank you. I just fixed it. This is one of the grittiest games I've seen the Saints do, even when Sean Payton was here. I mean, it's one of those gross games. Personally, as a fan of football, I loved it. Like, I love games that are heavy elements, and I know that might sound a little silly coming from a guy who has not only followed, but worked with and covered a dome team. But I love gritty games. Just like one of my favorite New Orleans Saints games of all time is actually going back several years when Mark Ingram and Alvin Kamara go off against the Buffalo Bills in Buffalo. Gritty, run focus, old school style of game, running 24 times in a row. This was that style of game. It's one of my favorite gritty games. You have the Saints run for 32 times, 139 yards, not terribly impressive, just like staring at a stat sheet, though that's certainly good. This was a game where rain was a factor through 75% of it. It was drops on both sides. I mean, Baker Mayfield throws for 46.4% completion, which makes a little bit more impressive the fact that Tyler Shuck manages to throw 65% in the rain for over 7 yards a clip, right? Rain, a heavy factor, especially in the first half, still there in the second half. And if you watch on the broadcast, sometimes that can be tough to tell until they get those real zoomed in moments. You can see the rain falling down. It's definitely a gritty game where you had to come up and have great defensive plays, great offensive plays. You saw the Saints take over on downs, I think 4 times this game. It was quite a bit. So let's actually start from the beginning like we tend to do. We'll go through and we'll cover all the stuff. In fact, I'm actually seeing it now. If you count the last drive of Tampa Bay, it was actually 5 turnovers on downs, which is just absolutely wild. Who dat to you? Appreciate y'all. God bless y'all being here. And look, heck at that stupid draft pick. I'll take beating a division rival. I wish it would have been Atlanta Falcons, but I'll take beating a division rival. Rashid Shaheed returning a touchdown today for the Seattle Seahawks against Atlanta. I'll take that as a Saints adjacent win. But let's talk about what we've seen so far. And I'm also going to give what I believe is an objective view of how I feel Tyler Shuck is now. And when I say I believe it's subjective, because I'm not necessarily rooting for Rattler or Shuck, I'm rooting for whoever can succeed leading the Saints. I'm going to tell you what I think after we've seen a little bit of Shuck through here, but we're going to save that towards the second half of the show. And we're going to talk about what we saw starting off. So again, welcome to all those here. Appreciate you. So we start off with a touchdown drive. And let me go ahead and tell you, if you're a Saints fan, if that doesn't make you happy, I don't care who's at quarterback, who's at coach. This team, past 4 or 5 years, has really struggled to do that in terms of converting early in the game, getting points, and building a lead. This team has spent the majority of the past 3 years playing from behind. Defensively, that matters. Offensively, that matters. Today, you start off touchdown, first drive. Now, you only had to go 45 yards, right? I get it. Right? You didn't have to do as much. Look, all that matters is, did you score? Like we've talked about it all year long. You need this offense to be able to start scoring more than 20 points, right? That has been a big key. You need the offense to start scoring, actually getting to the 20-point mark. Well, this is part of it. And this wasn't the defense carrying them and returning touchdowns. This was the offense starting off strong. You take what you can get early on. You accept what you get. You love the grit. All right, next up, though, you had a punt. Then you had a missed field goal and then an interception. So, number one, I want to be very clear. I don't want to dismiss the interception. I will tell you this. In terms of read, you had a cover 3 read. You had 2 deep goes on the outside. In terms of safety positioning, I have no issue with the throw for the interception. Clearly a miscommunication because the receiver stops. Shuck's expecting a go on the outside. You throw up a Hail Mary ball that ends up being an easy pick. That is what it is. The missed field goal previously bothers me a lot more. it bothers me a heck of a lot more. The fact that New Orleans has still not found an answer to its problems. And to be very clear, like, I understand that there are not a lot of options out there. The best free agent kicker available is probably Justin Tucker, and there's a very good reason why people aren't wanting to sign him. To be very clear, I'm not advocating that we should just look over everybody's past and all the problems that exist with an individual and be like, yeah, they can win us football games. I'm not making that argument, but I am saying, like, I know I just gave credit to the weather, but missing field goals has been a consistent theme. And I probably should just, again, it was a rough game. The field conditions were obviously very rough. Kicking through the rain's not easy. But that was rough for New Orleans because you did not get any more points until you get all the way 5 drives later. So you would punt, miss field goal, interception, punt, turnover on downs, and then finally you're back in the game with a touchdown where you have a great 3-drive stint here. Touchdown, field goal, touchdown. Both of those built upon Tyler Shuck running the football and making something happen, with one of them being a broken play. Because let's just be honest, watching this game, the offensive line once again did not have a great game. That doesn't mean they had a terrible game, but Dylan Radins is obviously a journeyman type of an offensive lineman. He's good enough to start in a pinch, but he's going to have problems. Cesar Ruiz clearly has not developed into what players want him to be. You're missing your starting center. You probably are looking for a new starting center. You got a rookie offensive lineman. You've got a guy who's first year in a new spot. Offensive line is absolutely not a strength for New Orleans right now. And that was the case when Spencer Rattler was here. That's the case with Tyler Shuck here. So you do have those issues. But the fact that you have a player who is making plays with that. In fact, one of the things that I talked about Spencer Rattler doing so well the past 2 years and coming out of college is Spencer Rattler dominates in the scramble drill. That's where he was the best. And that was something that Shuck had to get better at. Pocket awareness, pocket poise, and making those plays after everything breaks down. Well, he certainly showed that today, and you saw that in the touchdown runs. Because if you just looked at it based off his passing stats, you go, man, he probably had a rough day. He had an interception, no touchdowns thrown. Yeah, you like the completion percentage. You don't have a lot of yards, less than 150. But this was a very rain-soaked, gritty, tough game. It's the 7 carries for 55 yards and 2 TDs that really matter there. It's the 34-yard TD after what seemed like, this offense just couldn't find it. And to be very clear, after we've gone over the possessions, and for those who are here, I appreciate y'all so much for dropping the comments. To be clear, I also don't want to pretend this is my favorite game ever, because I'm still a little upset with more. For example, that third down, in my opinion, was worth challenging for a first down. And again, I still have an issue with how Kellen Moore can feel so passive at times. But again, goes back to what I said, the players showing a lot of grit. Tyler Shuck on these plays, particularly the breakdown run that results in a touchdown, that's that grit you look for from your team. You need somebody to step up and say, hey, I want to win this football game. And you had multiple people doing that on offense and defense. I want to make sure we shout them out. I also want to shout out to Vele, who, as we have seen the team move on from Brandon Cooks, Rashid Shaheed, that by extension opened up more opportunities for Vele. We in the chat and we in the community, we in Who Dat Nation could have argued that Vele should have been getting these snaps weeks ago. In fact, we have. We did that. Yeah, we've argued that we should have been doing that weeks ago. But it is finally happening. Leads your team today. And also think Chris Olave came in towards the end. Again, you're not going to see a lot of big receiving stats in this game because of it being such a rain-soaked game. But it's the big catches. And that's something that, again, we've not seen a lot of this year. This is why I like calling this a gritty game. It's in those tough moments, guys came up with big plays that needed to happen. Vele did it. Chris Olave had some great plays where his routes were cooked. You were just not able to give him the ball. But then you get to that scramble drill, which we just referenced. Tyler Shuck's able to find him as Chris Olave works back to the quarterback. Those type of plays are what this team needs to have when you have those things break down, and they just haven't had it most of the year. You had it today to beat your division leader. Some of you might be upset New Orleans is 3-10 right now, but let me just go ahead and tell you, I'll take these type of wins. I know everybody wants draft picks, but remember, Rev's team never tanks, so we're going to celebrate it. Defensively, I do think there's some shout-outs that need to be given, right? Because you don't see anything on the sack sheet. You might go, man, not a great game. I thought Kool-Aid McKinstry played a really good game today. Had a nice PD, played really sticky coverage, and I know he's had an up-and-down year. You look at Carl Granderson, who has been quiet for a while because you've seen Chase Young emerge. You saw Cameron Jordan have another multi-sack game. But let me tell you, Cameron Jordan, no shade to you. Carl Granderson was the best on that side of the ball today, and by a lot. Lots of play. He had 2 tackles for losses, multiple plays in the background, big PD that could have been something more. Defense really felt like they had a little extra in here. Maybe it's because it's a divisional game, right? those are the type of games that, regardless of record, you're going to play tough. And that's what you saw today, right? So you don't have anything on the sack sheet, but that could be a little bit misleading. It's why we talk about you can't box score scout, because if you watch that front seven, the front seven had probably one of their best games of the year. And that's with the running game of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers having a good day, right? Irving had a good day. White had a good day, right? Now they ran the ball almost 40 times, but it was mostly Baker Mayfield's scrambles that ended up hurting them the most, which is the same thing that happened on the opposite side of the field. Both of these teams end up relying a lot on the run game. A lot of the footing wasn't there because of the rain. Y'all saw, if you watched the game or you were at the game, the middle of the field just turned brown from just being torn up. It became a mud fest. It wasn't the worst mud fest we've seen, but clearly we started to see some footing issues. But the big key for me is the grit you saw them quarter one, quarter two, and just moving the ball, finding ways to score, especially after you got that first drive. You went up 7-0, and then you started to fall behind, which is what they've done through all year. You came into quarter three, though. You made two big plays. Love the designed run. That was them returning to a play that had worked in the first drive. They returned to it, ends up being a 34-yard touchdown for Tyler Shuck. Very reminiscent of, prime and, younger Taysom Hill. No shade at you, buddy, but Taysom, I won't be mad at you if you move on this year. I'm not trying to be mean to you. I'm just saying, Taysom, there's just things that happen. I said the same thing with Marcus Colston reached the end. I know, again, gritty game, weather game, but the drops, the inability to really move that extra yard that Taysom was known for, Taysom, buddy, I think it's it. Just like with Marcus Colston, those, towards the end of his career, he was known for his hands. His hands were gone. Taysom, buddy, Tyler Shuck's taking your spot. Like, Tyler Shuck is on these runs. I love you, man. I really do. I appreciate everything you've done for New Orleans. You are, in my opinion, one of the best New Orleans players ever. But Tyler Shuck deserves to get these runs is the point I'm making. And you see it here with those type of design plays that turn into 34-yard touchdowns. Those are the design plays that used to be Taysom Hill 34-yard touchdowns. Tyler Shuck is, I think, at this point, clearly better in that role. And wherever the quarterback of the future for New Orleans ends up being, I hope the NFL as a whole continues to explore more stuff like this, because the NFL goes through phases and changes. Tyler Shuck's ability to make those type of plays should be valued whether he's a full-time starting quarterback or not. I think the Taysom Hill thing maybe was a little bit early for the league. I'm not saying he didn't do great when he was here, but the X factor, that guy who's a big quarterback who can do it all, take advantage of that. Let the league adapt and embrace it. So no matter what, I think if you got a quarterback who can make these type of 34-yard TD runs and 13-yard TD runs, you want to start actually utilizing that a lot more than they have been. Talking about you, Kellen Moore, running every play from shotgun more than any other team in the NFL. So you have that TD, then you have a field goal. There are a couple of opportunities at the very end where both teams could have moved the ball and found a way. They didn't. And it ends up being again, turnover on downs, 5 turnover on downs for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. All right, we've gone through the quarters. I want to get to the comments a lot of you are making. Raheem, good to see you. Says, great win, good grit, but I need Ruiz off this team in the offseason. My only comment that I'll make to that is the same comment I make for any player. I said this about Andres Pete, who I believe Andres Pete was a better player than Cesar Ruiz. It's never replace somebody until you actually have somebody to replace them with. Like, don't just dump Ruiz. Remember, the New Orleans Saints have put a lot of money into Ruiz. Now, that isn't an argument I'm trying to make to you as a Saints fan that Ruiz should be starting just because he has a contract. But I am saying, like, right now, you don't cut Cesar Ruiz. And I know that's hard for Saints fans to hear, but there's literally nobody but going backwards. I know, pun intended, it's Cesar Ruiz. Yeah, here, I'll give it to you. There you go. But until you have something, don't do it yet. Now, at the same time, I agree with what I think you're trying to say. New Orleans needs to be drafting and signing, not and or, drafting and signing offensive line this offseason. And you would like to replace Cesar Ruiz. 100%. But I do want to point out that just because a guy is bad doesn't mean you cut him, because believe it or not, it can be worse. And I know some of you are about to question me on that. Let me give you an example that it can be worse. With Cesar Ruiz existing and playing very poorly this year, Tyler Shuck has been pressured on 23.5% of his snaps. Now, obviously, pressure rate goes across the entire offensive line. That also does not include today because the game just ended. I would assume it stays around that 24%. Now, for context, let's talk about what that's been in the past. Last year, Derek Carr, 24.1%. Not good. Anything over 20%, not good. Point is, technically better than last year with new faces and a more rotational offensive line. Go back 2022 when Jameis Winston had to start those 3 games. He was at 24%. That was the year Andy Dalton was the starter. He was at 15%. So, like, you do want it to get down. My point to the comment, and number one, I appreciate supporting Dat Confessional here. Make sure you start finding pieces to replace with first before you just go dumping. Though I absolutely get where you're coming from. I just like to remind players that if there is a positional group in the NFL that lacks depth across the entire NFL, it's offensive line. That is the weakest positional group right now in the NFL, anywhere. Ask any O-line, D-line, guru, whatever. A lot of y'all say quarterback. No, quarterback is simply the position that has the highest stake in winning you games. But quarterback is a deeper position than offensive line. I believe that. How can I say that? New Orleans has 2 guys in Spencer Rattler and Tyler Shuck that are both above average in terms of like their stats. And before anybody wants to argue with me, because I don't care if you're a Rattler or a Shuck fan, you go look at completion percentages and TD to interception ratios. Neither of them are at the bottom. I'm not saying that they're at the top, but neither of them are the worst quarterback in the league. Here's a better comparison. Neither of them are a certain kicker who decided to go to Indianapolis and talk trash, who ranked 36th among kickers. And not sure if y'all are aware, there's only 32 kickers in the NFL. So, like, neither of those players are that low on the list is what I'm saying. So, offensive line just doesn't have that depth right now. So, you got to work really hard to find that. You don't just dump a guy who's a starter caliber, even if they're not playing well at all. Truth be told, I went way too long on that segment. I apologize. Truth be told says with only 1 starter and Ruiz, the line played okay. Shuck is getting more comfortable. So is Coach Teeth. First off, shout out for Coach Teeth, and shout out to the No Music podcast over there with Ryan and the gang. But yeah, I still have a lot of issues with Coach Moore, to be very clear. I actually give a lot of credit to today's win to the players because I have a lot of coaching issues with today's game, including not going for it on the, challenging it on that 3rd down. I almost inexcusable for me, but definitely take the win, right? Raheem again says also Fuaga is on 1 week, then on, then off the next. Do you think they should just sit him the rest of the year? Absolutely not. Again, you cannot replace in-game NFL snaps. And I must stress, first time playing right tackle in the NFL, first year, on a team that does not have a good blocking tight end. Not trying to be mean. Foster Moreau, you're not a great blocking tight end. You're solid, I guess. Juwan Johnson, certainly not. Taysom Hill, certainly not. Why do I bring that up? Because that means you don't have a reliable chip help on the outside for a guy who's new at the position. And then to the left of him, we just had a 5-7 minute segment about how terrible Cesar Ruiz is. So again, Fuaga, am I saying he doesn't have ups and downs? Not at all. I think Fuaga has absolutely had ups and downs. At the same time, context is so important when you're doing evaluation. And that doesn't matter if it's a quarterback, offensive lineman, wide receiver, corner, doesn't matter. Context really does matter. And the context of Fuaga is rough. Same way that the context of Rattler's starts last year were rough, right? And you had to include that when you came to your conclusions. Same thing for Fuaga. A lot of stuff is going on. The man has played through injury. He's not got the most reliable partners next to him. And I still think he's done a solid job. Can you tell his 45 and his vertical set drops are a little bit slow and he's getting beat around the edge? Yeah, you can. And I'm not going to deny that's happening, but am I worried about Fuaga? No. When I look at the New Orleans Saints who are 3-10 and I look at the entire roster and I go, Fuaga, that one, that's a problem. No, he's very low on my list of worries at the moment. But thank you so much for dropping those comments. Aaron says Tyler Shuck will be the Saints starting quarterback next year. He's demonstrating poise and awareness in the pocket while making off-script plays. I'll say this. Tyler Shuck, and I told you we were going to get into this. Let's start. I think Tyler Shuck through 5 games now. And again, you want a minimum of 200 snaps before you build a scouting report. That's what they taught us in the Scouting Academy. So that's kind of where I'm basing a lot of this off of, all right? So now that we have Tyler Shuck, who has had his 5th start, who is now 2-3 in terms of the Saints are 2-3. He's not 2-3. The Saints are 2-3 in that time. I think you can see why a lot of people were high on his potential, whether that had been John Gruden or your favorite analyst who might have liked him. There's a lot of people over in the analyst space who are really big on Tyler Shuck, even with his age. And I told people Y'all might care about his age, as in there are a lot of fans who care about how old he is, but people who evaluate really don't care how old Tyler Shuck is. They really don't. Quincy Avery, well-known name in the space right now, doesn't give a heck about it, and talked about being one of the better players in terms of at the position in this past draft. Some people will care about the age, some people will not. I will say this, though. The positives we talked about Tyler Shuck having are on display. He does throw a better ball than Spencer Rattler in terms of ball placement. Very rarely is he behind a receiver, and that matters. You've seen that in his 5 starts where there's a lot more yards after catch opportunities. If you go look at the advanced analytics of our wide receivers, a lot of the yards after catch have started to happen more recently, right? You look at the average in terms of like how many yards does a receiver get per reception. Those numbers are starting to go up over the past 5 weeks compared to what they were earlier in the season. So the elements that you did see him have as a positive are showcasing themselves. And then on top of that, he is getting better at things that he wasn't as good at compared to Spencer Rattler. One thing I said Spencer Rattler was significantly better than him at was the scramble drill, right? That was something that I gave Tyler Shuck a lot of kind of grief for, because when you get to the NFL, things move a lot faster. You need to be able to operate when scenarios break down. And is it hard to imagine scenarios break down when you have this offensive line, when you have this wide receiver room that's been, very up and down with their performance? It's not hard to imagine that at all. So all those things said, you might go, okay, context is important. So you've seen him improve that. How can we know he's improved? Well, just look at today's game. Right? 2 rushing touchdowns, with one of those coming in a completely off-scripted play that had to happen, right? New Orleans has to maintain that drive. If you give it back, momentum is a thing in the NFL. You give that ball back, it's quite possible that Baker Mayfield and his team, which I still think are probably going to have success in the playoffs, it's very possible that you're going to see. I really do think the Saints could have lost this game multiple times. And I don't think it's controversial to say it. I'm not trying to take away from the win. I think they could have lost this game multiple times. But the importance was the grit and the determination to make things happen. And that's what you saw in those type of plays. When you have a guy who breaks away from 3 sacks and runs it in, that's the type of grit that you need to see from a guy. And that is the definition of the scramble drill. Whether it's connecting on a deep ball, whether it's connecting on an intermediate route, a comeback route like we saw him do with Chris Olave here in the second half to extend drives, you need to see that. And that's something that he's improved on. I still might argue Spencer Rattler is better at it as a whole, but if you're evaluating both of them, which was the whole goal of having both of them start, right? I mean, you needed Tyler Shuck to start at some point if you felt that Rattler had shown you enough and wasn't maybe increasing or improving the way you wanted him to. So that was why you give Shuck snaps. I disagreed of when that should have started, but at the same time, we're in now, and you're going to have at the end of the season basically equal scouting reports in terms of games, snaps, and opportunities to compare these two and see, okay, what is that idea moving forward? And to the point of the commenter, it is possible that Tyler Shuck can be that guy. Now, as we're in this Tyler Shuck segment, I do want to say, as impressive as today's game was, is it enough for me to say I'm not willing to look at quarterback in the offseason? Absolutely not. And I say that as someone who I said in the preseason that Tyler Shuck, this is probably his job to lose, as in between Rattler and Shuck, I've always felt that Shuck was the preferred option if he was ready. At the same time, what you've seen from Tyler Shuck, while great that we've won the game, definitely not enough to say I'm building a franchise around him. And I say that after giving him a lot of flowers and a lot of praise today, especially over the past 5 starts, right? I do think that you've seen enough good to absolutely want to continue to move in that direction. I mean, hell, you've already won 2 games in the past 5. You won 1 in the first 8. Changes matter, right? And you've changed a lot. At the same time, let's not pretend he's perfect, right? 3% of his passes right now are going for interceptions. 3% of his passes right now are going for touchdowns. And while absolutely with you that running touchdowns should matter, because they do, he has equal TDs, equal INTs. He has a completion percentage, while solid and actually really good for rookie quarterbacks this year, not at the top end of the game. He's taking a lot of sacks because he is still working to get better at poising the pocket, better at manipulating the pocket, better at getting the ball out quick when he needs to, and better at seeing the field. Certainly not ready to crown him the future is what I'm saying. But I do like that we are seeing consistent improvement from it. As Don says in the chat, I think Shuck is gaining confidence. He doesn't make that run 2 weeks ago. I think that's completely plausible. It's always tough to say woulda, coulda, shouldas, to quote the famous New Orleans Saints coach. We can easily say, oh, yeah, he would have done that 2 weeks ago. We don't really know, but it's fair to make that conjecture, right? You do see him playing a little bit more confident. And again, while I just talked about context is key, another aspect is true. Like when you get 2-3 years down the road, are you going to remember the fact that the interception he threw today was just a duck because the receiver stopped running? No, you're not going to remember that. You're just going to be like, okay, he threw equal TDs to INTs, something you have to work on. And for somebody who's looking for an example of around the league where you needed that to happen, look at Drake May. Look at, gosh, I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, for bringing up a guy who's MVP level. Look at Josh Allen. Josh Allen starting his career, you could see the potential, like you could see the raw traits that would make you believe he could be successful. But the first 2 years of Josh Allen were pretty much the same thing. He still was a little bit turnover prone, but obviously he could make movement in the pocket. He could build those plays, and it wasn't until year 3 that you saw him take over. Now, for anybody who comes in and says it before I do, let me go ahead and say it. Josh Allen was 22 as a rookie. That's 4 years. But as I said, Tyler Shuck being 26 means he's got 2 full contracts of health as a quarterback. Knock on wood, all things being good. So we'll see. Definitely not willing to bank on him. And I would say this, if New Orleans maintains a top 5 draft pick, they 100% should consider quarterback. We'll talk about that more in the offseason. And I'm more than happy to have those discussions and debates with other Saints fans about it. I think even what you've seen from an amazing gritty game from Tyler Shuck today, you still go into the offseason equally willing to look at free agents and draft at quarterback. That's okay, though. You can still say he had a great game. We still got a long season left, right? We still have several games left, but I do think he had a great game. It is one of those games that I love because stats don't tell this game story at all. It was a weather game. It was a gritty divisional game. It's one of the ones where you want to get those 1970 NFL film soundtracks on and batter it on and have the highlights play through. It was that type of game. I love it. It's old school. Freaking love it. Same time, I'm not putting all my eggs in the Shuck basket quite yet. But very excited after seeing, just visual improvements. Just how he's actually processing the field is definitely getting better. Would love to see that continue getting next week. Platypus says gutsy play gets everyone else buying in and wanting you to hit on those gutsy plays. It'd be a good thing if we're worried about that second contract, 100%. Right, and as Mr. Don says, the interception doesn't bother him. And there's context. There's several interceptions that Spencer Rattler threw over the past 2 years that didn't really bother me. Several that did. In fact, it's funny, because we can talk about interceptions, but some of the worst passes quarterbacks throw never get picked off, but they're still terrible passes, right? There's still some bad decisions that happen. And Shuck had a couple of bad decisions today, right? There are a couple of plays where you're like, yeah, I don't know if you should have made that one, son. That you're gritting a little bit too much. But at the same time, let's use Baker Mayfield as an example, right? Baker Mayfield's in his, 8th year in the league right now. Baker Mayfield has bounced around multiple teams. One thing Baker Mayfield has always had is grit. In a lot of ways, Baker Mayfield reminds me, for you older football fans, because I just know at 36 now, I'm no longer a younger football fan. But in a lot of ways, obviously not the bouncing around teams way, but the grit way, the how you play way, Baker Mayfield reminds me of Brett Favre. And to be clear, Baker Mayfield's TD to interception percentage is definitely better than Brett Favre, all that. I'm not saying he's as turnover prone, blah, 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 blah. What I am saying, though, is Baker Mayfield is willing to force some things to happen because of that grit, because he's very passionate. He wants to make a play, and sometimes that can lead to mistakes. Brett Favre was very much the same way. He made an entire career in the 90s over being that guy. Statistically, Brett Favre was never the best, but there was that trait you had about Brett Favre that people like John Madden would always run with. Again, for all of our newer, younger football fans, I'm shouting out a lot of old school names, where he had that it factor, or people would say, oh, he's a winner, right? It's a big reason why still today people get so enamored with, quarterback win/loss. It's because it is a position that, how you play it and the way that you approach it can absolutely influence the entire game. And arguably only one position can do it, and it is quarterback. So even though I strongly disagree with the win and loss being a quarterback stat, I understand the logic of why it gets brought up. So all that to say about Shuck, you saw that same level of grit today, right? And the common tag thrown around, as I see people throw it in chat, is gunslingers, right? And just to be clear, Drew Brees was a gunslinger, most accurate gunslinger of all time. But Drew Brees made a lot of stupid, what we would classify as, if you put it on a whiteboard and you were drawing the play up or you're watching it on film, you say, that's dumb, we don't do that. Example, Drew Brees, in my opinion, is the top 5 quarterback in NFL history. I watched Drew Brees throw in a triple coverage 30 yards downfield on the left hash to a fullback. But when you're good enough to do that, as in a game like today, when you score 2 touchdowns, when you lead your team to victory, that's okay. That's fine. Fine. Throw me that random 35-yard pass on the left sideline to a fullback in triple coverage. You know what? Fine, Drew. You do that. As long as you keep winning NFC championship games, Super Bowls, playoff games, breaking NFL records, you know what? You keep doing that. But the key is you got to be successful. That's the big key, right? So if Tyler Shuck, if what you saw today is, just a glimpse into what the future could be, it could be a lot of fun. But I do want to add that I do believe there's a lot of growth that needs to happen, just like Spencer Rattler last year, right? If you really do want him to be a franchise quarterback, it's just the brutal truth. He ain't there yet. But man, today was really fun to watch. Really fun to watch. And just to really drive my point home, because Spencer Rattler's not a gunslinger. Spencer Rattler's far closer to being a manager style than a gunslinger. And look, to be clear, there's nothing wrong with either one. Spencer Rattler this year, if there's one thing he was way better at, turnovers. He was much better at protecting the ball. At the same time, who's better at getting a first down? I think Tyler Shuck. Like, who's going to try to make it happen? Shuck's going to. Look, and in fact, that interception is a great example. Spencer Rattler is the type of quarterback who will wait that last half second to make sure the read is open before he makes the throw. Tyler Shuck is the guy who reads the pre-snap, and as soon as the ball is hiked and he sees the coverage is the same, throw the ball to a spot. Uh-oh, we'll see what happens. YOLO. Bloop. Spencer Rattler's not that kind of a player. There are pros and cons to both sides. Spencer Rattler's going to turn the ball over less, generally speaking. I mean, you would expect him to turn the ball over less. And he has. In fact, I really argue that's something Spencer Rattler really improved on this year, and I believe he should get credit for it. But you also don't get as many first downs. You also might not get as much success in terms of scoring unless somebody else picks up with that grit. And you saw that grit today with Shuck. That was really nice to see. Rasoon says, do y'all think Mendoza can run Moore's offense better than Tyler Shuck? I think that's a very, very unknown. But I will say and repeat what I said earlier. I have no issue if New Orleans drafts a quarterback in the top 10. Put that quarterback right there next to Tyler Shuck and let them fight it out. And everybody's going to be like, well, man, then you have to start the first rounder. I hate that logic. You let them duke it out. You drafted Aaron Rodgers while you still had Brett Favre, right? You drafted Patrick Mahomes when Alex Smith was still a Pro Bowl level quarterback, right? You duke it out. You let it see what happens. And if the first rounder's not good enough, good. Second rounder was good enough last year. Let him be this year. If he is better, well, hell, if we're bragging about how good Tyler Shuck is right here, how much more would we be bragging if somebody's better than this? So I don't think you've seen enough to be like, oh, we're riding on Shuck. At the same time, Shuck definitely deserves more snaps. The Rock says, but then that's a wasted pick. I don't believe in a wasted pick. I don't believe that exists. I really don't. Unless that player actually performs terribly, that's not a wasted pick. Let me give you an example of a wasted pick. Drafting an offensive lineman in the 3rd round that never makes your roster. That was a wasted pick because clearly you didn't scout them correctly, unless something happened like family or whatever. That's not a wasted pick, right? If somebody works hard and is better, that's not a wasted pick. Somebody just decided they're better, right? Here, another example. Again, this is my take. Look at college football and then look at the NFL. Most people in the NFL were not 5-star prospects, right? Things change. Players get better. Some people just have it, which you can't really quantify. Some people are just more of a winner. Some people have more passion. Whatever it is that makes that player better. It's not a wasted pick if it results in better. And how can it result in better? Let's just say you drafted Mendoza as the New Orleans Saints. But drafting Mendoza put a chip the size of the Rocky Mountains on Tyler Shuck, and he just came out and became a 303 TD every freaking game player. Because you said, I don't care how good you did. We got a new guy. Like, if that's what drives him to be great, right? It was the same logic why I had no issue drafting Tyler Shuck when you had Spencer Rattler. There are plenty of people who said Spencer Rattler did good enough last year, you could just roll with it. I didn't agree. Same thing now. Shuck, through 5 games, I think Shuck has looked better through 5 games than Rattler looked through 8. Neither of them have shown you that they're a franchise quarterback. Absolutely draft the next guy. And if that guy pushes Tyler Shuck to be great, then that wasn't a wasted pick. If Mendoza, just the example y'all brought up, ends up being great, then it's not a wasted pick. It's only a wasted pick if the player doesn't contribute to your team in any way. That's a wasted pick. I could argue Reggie Bush is a wasted pick. Why? Because you spent a top 5 pick on a guy who never really was heavily utilized in your offense, was never the number 1 option, never had a 1,000-yard rushing season as a running back. But Reggie Bush is absolutely not a wasted pick. But people argue that if we're just going off, top 5, what you spent, what you get in return. He helped make that team a Super Bowl team. Was that a wasted pick? Because if we're going by stats, he was no Adrian Peterson. If we're going by influence, he certainly no Derrick Henry. But at the same time, would you have taken Mario Williams instead? If you could go back in history right now, knowing the New Orleans Saints win a Super Bowl in 2009, go to the NFC Championship game in 2006, would you have taken Mario Williams over Reggie Bush? I think the answer would be silly to say yes, because you know the result. You know that team is going to become a Super Bowl champion, and it works together as one unit. So again, all I care about is does black and gold get back to winning football games, potentially making the playoffs, and maybe even, God, please, 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 one day again winning a Super Bowl. I don't care if the quarterback throws 5,000 yards to do that, or if it's Trent frickin' Dilfer. I don't care if it's 2,500 yards or 5,000. All I care is, do the black and gold win football games? Just like today. Do I care that Tyler Shuck only threw 144 yards? No, because I think context is important. He still threw over 7 yards an attempt, which was something we griped about all season long. He ran for 2 TDs. Like, I'm not griping about it. He had about 200 yards total. And even then, 200 yards total offense is half of what Drew Brees would put up. But all that matters is, as my friend Jameis Winston would do, you ate a W. That's all I care about. Do you think Moore's offense is in sync with Stanley's defense? I don't think anything in the coaching staff is in sync right now. That's my opinion. And I think the coaching staff is still something that is trying to find their gel. And I think a lot of it is Moore is still trying to figure out who he's going to be as a head coach. So, yeah. That's what I think. I think the coaching staff is just as much, if not worse of a problem than the roster. At the same time, I mean, we'll see where it ends up being. I mean, I want to give Kellen Moore an opportunity, but am I impressed with his 3-10 New Orleans Saints team? No. At the same time, one of the biggest flaws I believe a lot of NFL teams make is they never allow a head coach enough time to develop what he wants and see what happens. And the truth is, we as fans are impatient, right? We are very impatient. 3-10, you've already got people calling for Kellen Moore's job because we want to be winners now. We want to be back on the win column now. We want to be back in the playoffs now. But that's just not how it works in professional sports. I mean, and yeah, guys, we've already talked about the rain, a big reason why the yards are low. But as I say all the time, nobody is going to remember that 2 years from now. All you're going to look at is refer back to this player. Yeah, context is important. But at the same time, Drew Brees played in weather games and threw 300 yards. It can happen. My main point is Kellen Moore's got to be given time, and sadly, head coaches take time. You might go 4 years, and it doesn't work out. At the same time, it can take years for something to pop off. Very few head coaches have ever just been like great season one and just stayed great. And the greatest head coaches ever were not like that. Like Bill. Yeah, Belichick was not a great head coach to start in terms of win-loss record. It took time. It just did. That's just the truth of it. I mean, I think the only coach I can think of right now in the past 30 years that came in, has had 10 plus years in the league where he's just dominant, is Mike Tomlin. And he got gifted a team that was already a Super Bowl caliber team. And I'm not taking that away that the Steelers are good now, because obviously for him to maintain the Steelers being good now took effort. But the Steelers won the Super Bowl in 2008 with Tomlin, but the Steelers won the Super Bowl in 2005 with Cowher. Like, he had a Super Bowl caliber team already. Like, there were players from 2005 still on that 2008 team. Now, Mike Tomlin has made it continue, and hell, we can talk about how good Tomlin is 10, 15 years from now when he's probably done. But my point is, very, very, very rare. That doesn't happen often. Sean Payton is the exception to the rule. And even then, he did have play calling duties first, and he failed at those play calling duties and had play calling duties ripped from him, which I personally still classify. Like, I still count that, because it's one thing to be a coordinator, but let's say you're an offensive coordinator like Kubiak and you're under a Shanahan, right? I mean, yeah, you're the OC, but we all know at the end of the day who's actually running things, right? So Peyton was the play caller for the 2000s New York Giants. He had that ripped from him because of poor performance. So even Peyton, when he was given the ability to be in charge, failed at first. I'm not saying he completely failed. He didn't wash out, but sometimes you got to give guys the opportunity. And just Kellen Moore is going to need that opportunity. We'll see what it turns into. I'm not saying he should have 5 or 6 years and just whatever happens, happens, but minimum 2 or 3. Unless, now, if next year we're 1-16, sure, fire him. I think you can know, right? You could definitely know. But if you see it trending upward, even if it's a slow trend, you stay with the upward trend. And you see how it ends up going, right? That's what I believe, right? That's my take on the situation. And it's not a fun take because, again, I'm 36 years old. You know how long it's been the Saints won a Super Bowl? 16 years. I was 20. I wasn't married. I didn't have kids. Yeah, a lot's changed. That was 4 jobs ago. Bro, I have way less hair on the top of my head. I've got a little white patch on the side of my head because I'm getting old. It's been a long time. So it sucks to say I might have to wait another 3 to 4 years for I maybe see a Super Bowl caliber Saints team. But that's the nature of the NFL. There are teams that have people who've been fans for the past 3 decades who can't get out the cellar. Looking at you, Jacksonville Jaguars, Cleveland Browns. Frick, I mean, how deep do we really want to go down this rabbit hole of all the teams that no matter what they do, New York Jets just can't find a way to win anything? And it's been decades. Like maybe they get close, New York Jets, and just they're always second fiddle to the big brother in New England. Remember, shout out to Sexy Rexy, and Mark Sanchez, the New York Jets. They literally became memes, but were they really that bad? Doesn't matter. They never were able to finish it off, right? It might be years before we see that again. Takes time. Mr. Dawson says, I thought Kellen Moore may have coached his best game today. It's tough for me because there are individual moments that I look at and I'm very frustrated by the play and by the play calling, that is, and the choices. But you might be right. I could just be having that initial reaction, that knee jerk of like seeing some of those decisions and going, man, I'm really unhappy with what he did. Maybe it was the best game today. At the end of the day, you did win, and that's kind of important when determining, best games. So maybe you do have a point. I'm just, I'm still on the not convinced bandwagon of Kellen Moore, just like I'm not convinced about Tyler Shuck. But at the same time, man, like, hell, you've won 2 games of the past 4. And besides the Atlanta game, which was incredibly disappointing because it's coming out of a bye week, losing to Miami wasn't really that disappointing. It was a close game. They absolutely could have been better. Duh, you lost. But you've played very competitive football, and you've won 2 of your last 4 games. I mean, for a team that is bad, let's not pretend like this is a good team. For a team that is bad, top to bottom, we do not have a great roster. We do not have a proven coaching staff. Winning 2 of your last 4 is pretty daggum good contextually. Like that's actually, when you look at it like that, it's like, oh, okay, it's actually not that bad. It's not that bad. Not good. A lot of improvements need to be made. Not great, but it's better. It's better than red, green, red. For those who are listening to the show, I'm rattling off losses versus wins, and losses are in red and wins are in green. So slowly but surely, we'll see. Matt says, just my take is this O-line situation is precarious, put it nicely. And I don't disagree. But the only thing I add into context for that, Matt, is last year, technically worse. In terms of pressure percentages, worse. Now, I'm not denying what you're saying. Again, I just said this is a bad football team. But I'm just saying it's not like, everything is just the worst. It's slow moving forward. I said this about a month ago on the show, right? Part of my frustration with Kellen Moore, actually, I think I've said it pretty clearly over the past 2 months. Part of my frustration with Kellen Moore is that he is implementing his system regardless of if players fit. Basically, what Kellen Moore is doing, in my opinion, my formerly professional opinion, is Kellen Moore is putting in his thing and seeing who fits. And whoever doesn't fit, we move on. Brandon Cooks, move on. Trevor Penning, move on. Potentially Spencer Rattler, move on. Regardless of playing to the player's strengths. And for those who are listening to Dat Confessional, because I know not everybody catches every episode, I know the Spencer Rattler topic is very controversial for many people in the fandom. I will loudly say, I do not believe Spencer Rattler had a coach that was particularly playing to his strengths. That is part of the reason that Spencer Rattler was benched. Spencer Rattler also played really poorly at times that a lot of people don't want to acknowledge, but in no way do I believe Kellen Moore was playing to his strengths. Kellen Moore has said, this is the system I want to create. Who fits on this roster that I inherited from Dennis Allen for the most part? Because you don't turn over a 53-man roster in 1 year. You just don't do that, right? You can't create a quality NFL team by just dumping everything that you got handed by the previous administration. You just don't do that. So he's seeing who fits. And that can be a very frustrating process for us as we go, why are you using Spencer Rattler like that? Why are you using Chris Olave like that? Why are you doing, knowing what their strengths are? Because we've seen them in the past. Kellen Moore is doing that right now. And it might end up working out fine, chat. He might end the season, let's just say 6-11, which is definitely not good. But if that turns into a 8-9 after that, and then an 11-6 after that, it's fine. 2 years from now, we could be talking about all these conjectures we had as being silly. We knew all along he was going to be great. It just took patience. I don't know. I think there's plenty of reasons to doubt right now, but you just got to wait. See how it goes. I think he's put his system in. That doesn't mean I don't think he doesn't want to win football games. I think he does. But I think he says, we've got to find what's going to work so I know who to keep and I know who to move on from and what holes that need to be filled. And that's what he's doing. And sometimes it gives you a 24-20 gritty win in the weather against a division rival. Sometimes it means you lose at home in the dome to the division rival. But thank God he at least didn't apologize for anything that happened against the Atlanta Falcons. At least he didn't do that. No coach would do that, right? No coach would come out and apologize for beating the division rival or anything. That'd be stupid. Who would do that? Okay. Let me get some final comments. I do appreciate y'all contributing. Thank you to all the people who are here in the show today, hanging out, spending some time, and just talking Saints football. Because, look, it's been a rough year, but that doesn't mean it can't be a fun year. I've had a great time. Throughout the course of the season, it has been very rough, had many ups and downs, but at the same time, I'm enjoying football. Hopefully, you're enjoying football. Because at the end of the day, that's what should matter. We should be enjoying. And I enjoyed today. So for one day of this year, if nothing else, I enjoyed today. I had a good time. It's nice to see him win. So Don says, I think Breeze would have been good anywhere, but I don't think he would have done what he did with Peyton anywhere else. That's tough because we don't know. But those are the arguments we can make those in the offseason, Mr. Don. Daniel says, quarterbacks need time to throw with improved protection in the offseason and weapons. Shuck could be awesome, and so would Rattler. Shaky O-line play is hard to play quarterback. Skill players haven't been consistent. There's truth to that. At this point, and hell, Drew Brees has said as much. I think you have enough tape to know what Spencer Rattler can be in the NFL. I don't think the same is true for Shuck, but I do think the same is true for Rattler. I think Rattler, I compare him to a Jacoby Brissett type. I think Rattler is good enough to be a low-end starter and a high-end backup for a long time. It wouldn't surprise me if Spencer Rattler finds himself in the league for 10-plus years. And I mean that sincerely. But I don't think he's got greatness in him. And Spencer Rattler, if you somehow come across this podcast, please prove me wrong. Because all that matters is if you prove me wrong, it means the Saints are a good team. Hell yeah. Let Rev be wrong. Let the random ginger who covered the team for 4 years be wrong. Who cares? Let me be wrong. I'd love to see it happen. I just like winning. Today was a good day. It was a good day. Abraham, good to see you, says, I'll take competitive games and a team that looks like they're having fun. Absolutely. And it did look like this team was having fun. Demario Davis looked like he was having a blast. Chase Young, having a blast. Kool-Aid McKinstry, having a blast. I mean, it sucks that I don't see some of my favorites that I've gotten to love, like Alvin Kamara, and but hey, man, this is a good, fun, competitive football game. It was. Kevin good to see says, Shuck is a great quarterback. I saw people have the same response to Josh Allen before he became the quarterback he is today. So, only thing I'll say, Kevin, is I don't see greatness in Shuck in terms of like what you're seeing right now, but you definitely see traits that could be built around, and he could excel if he continues to improve. And that might sound like I'm giving you a non-answer. I'm giving you the answer I was taught in scouting, right? He has a lot of traits, and there's reasons to be excited about him if those traits develop further. But he's not great yet, and that's okay. And you are right. Josh Allen had those traits, even though the first 2 years of Josh Allen were not superb football. They weren't. But the coaches in the front office of Buffalo knew that, right? They knew who they drafted. Just like Green Bay knew when they drafted Aaron Rodgers, his mechanics needed work. They knew he needed to sit and he needed to learn. That's fine. Love needed work. That's okay. Sometimes you get those snaps in a season like Josh Allen and you end up being great. Sometimes you get those snaps. You take a red shirt year like Aaron Rodgers, you become great. Also, sometimes you just end up sucking. We'll have to wait and see. You could absolutely be right. But yeah, there are good traits. There are reasons to like Tyler Shuck. And you're seeing growth in games like today where things that he wasn't great at in preseason training camp or even necessarily in college, like scramble drill at the NFL level and pocket presence, you're seeing him adapt and be better at that, at least in this game. And that's good. Titan Brother says, bottom line is Moore hasn't shown me enough to understand how to develop quarterbacks, let alone coach the team. Now, will he prove me wrong? We'll see. Yeah, we'll absolutely see. Kevin says, go back and look at Rattler's college story when he was benched. He has a tendency to turn the ball over and over and over. Sure, but that's college, Kevin. One thing that Spencer Rattler improved on greatly in the NFL was his turnovers. We talked about it earlier. Now, is that me advocating that Spencer Rattler should come back and start over Shuck? No. But just because somebody was something in college doesn't mean how they are now, which is why it's so important to do trait-based analysis, in my opinion. I'm very biased. I was obviously trained for scouting, so I'm very biased to the method. I want to be very clear because there are other methods, FYI. There is hyper-analytics methods. There are people who believe that purely through advanced analytics is you can predict how good a player will be based on certain advanced analytics. So there are differing schools of thoughts. I believe in trait-based analysis. Traits supersede things like benching or bad stat boxes, things like that. It's finding tools that can be used and how good you are with that tool. Is it as sharp as a perfect katana or is it as dull as a blade you saw at the flea market? Trait-based analysis, I believe, is the best way, and it is the old school way. The analytics can absolutely be a great tool as well for finding what players can do. And there are some really nice traits for Tyler Shuck. Spencer Rattler also has some nice traits. If somebody wanted to take the time to develop those traits for him, I think he could do well. I don't think he has the ceiling Shuck has, and I've always said that. I do not believe Spencer Rattler has the ceiling of Tyler Shuck, but I do believe he had a higher floor. So here we are. We'll see how it goes, man. I mean, none of us know everything. None of us know everything, and we'll see what it ends up looking like. I'm very excited after games like today to see a gritty win from a team that needed it. It needed this gritty win. So Daniel points out Rattler needs a different velocity on his throws and to develop touch. All of his throws are rockets. This is, again, yeah, I've mentioned that as well. We talked about it when I went over the scouting report. I have put on this channel scouting reports of Spencer Rattler based off taking his film and doing NFL traits. Where is he at? And that is one of his issues. That is something that Shuck, if y'all remember back in the preseason, I said this is something Shuck is better at. Ball placement, touch, as in actually throwing the football. Pocket awareness, scramble drill. I said Spencer Rattler's better than that right now. He is better than Tyler Shuck in those areas. But one thing I said from day one, and many of you who've been here the entire time will remember, I said Tyler Shuck is better in terms of ball placement. He is better in terms of touching his passes. And we'll see. Do those traits get to that elite level? God, I would love that. That'd be fantastic. Be amazing. But there's also things that we need to see Tyler Shuck improve on. I'm excited to see the next game. Put it that way, right? I have a smile on my face and I look forward to watching football for a team that's 3-10. And I think that says a lot about this football team. It says a lot that I'm excited about watching a team that's 3-10 because you do see potential. And I didn't even see that at all times this week, but today was kind of a breakthrough game for me because I'm not used to seeing what we saw today from this team. What you saw today was different. Now, for those curious where today ends us up in the draft rankings, we are currently pick number 5 as of where things are literally at this moment of recording. We still have the evening games that have to happen, so those have not wrapped up yet. We obviously don't have the Monday night games, but none of the Monday night games apply to what we're discussing because Houston is not doing that poorly. Houston's got a winning record. They're playing KC. KC's having a down year, but they're still a 500 team. And then it's Philly and the Chargers. So none of those teams are currently combating the New Orleans Saints for being a top 5 or a top 10 pick. New Orleans is currently the number 5 pick in the NFL draft. And the games going on right now are Chicago, Green Bay. Actually, I can just look on the screen. Chicago, Green Bay, LA, Arizona, and Denver, and Vegas. Vegas is the only one that could impact the New Orleans Saints. They are currently losing to the Denver Broncos. If they were to win and become 3-10, that could potentially shake up the order. I would have to look at the tiebreakers. But right now, the New Orleans Saints are the number 5 pick in the NFL draft. If they do, like I said earlier, manage to go 6-11, well, then they're probably going to be more likely drafting between 9 and 12. Just to give y'all a number of where that could end up being. Probably between 9 and 12 if that's where it ends up being. So, yeah, that's where we're at. I've had a great episode and a lot of fun with y'all. We've run, gosh, you know I'm having a good time when we've gone like an hour. Appreciate y'all. Thank y'all so much for hanging out. I know it's been an up and down season, but I appreciate y'all so much for being Who-Dats and spending time and letting me enjoy the game with you because I'll be honest, a lot of enjoyment comes from having the community. If you're not already in the Discord, feel free to join. If you don't follow me on X, aka Twitter, feel free to do that. I'm going to put in the description real quick or in the chat for those who are live with us, a link to the Discord. If y'all want to come join, again, not everybody does Discord, but if you do, that's where we can chat. I don't do this as a full-time career anymore, so this is just for fun. If you enjoyed it, share it out. If you didn't, come back next time and tell me how wrong I am. I'm all good. Who-Dat, God bless. We'll catch you on the next one. Deuces, that's me. Appreciate you. Let's see if we win next week.